Hi, welcome to another episode of Good Cube Kitchen's Good Cube Sunday. My name is Yassine Butler and I am your host, and today we are going to be making some red velvet ice cream. Growing up, red velvet was definitely a family favorite, and being able to turn it into an ice cream seems like the perfect thing to do. So, first thing we're going to do is combine 1 cup of heavy cream and 1 cup of whole milk into a bowl with a cap full of apple cider vinegar. One of the things that makes red velvet is the use of buttermilk in its batter. And so to bring over that little bit of tartness, I'm going to basically make buttermilk. All that's required to make buttermilk is about a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar for every cup of milk that you're using. Next, I'm going to combine over the chocolate. I'm using cocoa powder, and I've already combined it with a little bit of milk so that it could easily incorporate. The chocolate is what gives red velvet its rich color. Now, the final product of this does not come out really red. It actually comes out more pink. I'm not entirely positive why that happened, but it was still delicious. The next thing you need to add over is your cream cheese. You want to make sure that your cream cheese gets some time to sit and become room temperature and nice and soft. Otherwise, your blender will be working all day. You can do this in a regular blender, but I love using my immersion blender. I've wanted one for years and I finally got it, so every chance I get to use it, I will be using it. It is easier if you break it up into chunks when you're using an immersion blender so that it can surround the chunk and blend it so much easier. Next, we're going to add over 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar and just a sprinkle of some sea salt. With all of the heavy milky flavors, you need something just to lift up that just a hair. So now, to bring out the immersion blender. And you're just going to blend this until it's nice and smooth. Now that it's nice and smooth, all we have to do is put it in the refrigerator for about 2 hours and then we can churn it. Alright, so now that I figured out what was going on with my freezer, it's time to actually churn this. Now, having let this sit for so long, the red dye has given it a bit of a bitterness, if you will. So I'm going to ramp up the sugar flavor with a little powdered sugar. And the reason I'm using powdered sugar is because I want this to really be a nice smooth consistency. And if I use regular sugar, I'd have to heat it up so that I could make sure that the granules were super fine and dissolved, where if I use powdered sugar, I can make sure that that happens even while it's cold. So I'm gonna do powdered sugar and a little heavy cream. Pouring this over. Alright, now I'm gonna just pour this over. Now, just gonna let it churn. And now we're just gonna let it churn. All right. Wow. Not as red as I wanted it to be. Came out more of a pink, but surprisingly creamy, and it actually tastes like red velvet. I was really worried that my experimental decision to add the vinegar to it was going to cause the fats to separate and maybe cause some curdling, but that didn't happen. So I'm gonna pop this in the freezer for about 2 hours and then we'll scoop it up. Alright, so I let this freeze overnight and now let's scoop it. I realized that this was much harder than I wanted it to come out, and so I had to switch plating formats. I wanted to put it in a cone, but I realized that wasn't going to work. So a bowl it is. A great way to make hard ice cream easy to scoop. Just have some hot water on hand. I microwave my water for about 3 minutes. I'm thinking this is partially so difficult to scoop because there's no cornstarch. And there's also no corn syrup. Now to top it off, I'm going to hit it. So here you have it, red velvet ice cream, and I used some of the cookie crust that I had left over from the skull cheesecake episode. Until making this, I never realized how much of red velvet's flavor is really owed to the fact that you use red food dye. it does lend a very important flavor element to the entire process. It's not as smooth as I want it to be, and that's probably because I used the apple cider vinegar to give it that butter milk flavor. That's a key ingredient to red velvet. But overall, it's a really good ice cream. You do have that tanginess that you get with a good red velvet cake. You have the slight hint of chocolate, which deepens the flavor. Part of the reason that I added the Oreos is because I really like my red velvet to be a chocolate cake. But if you put too much chocolate in your batter, then you don't really get a nice red or even pink color. It's kind of just bright brown, and that's not what I was going for. I was actually going for redder than this, but that didn't work out. The recipe, the picture in the recipe was really bright red. This is not bright red. It is what it is. But it makes a really delicious ice cream. If you figure out how to make it as red as possible, let me know so that I can try this again. But this is a really great red velvet ice cream. And with your leftover Oreo cookie crumbles, it makes for a great sundae. As always, thank the good Lord for good food and good times. All that good with GOODCUB. Please follow me on all social media platforms. That's GOODCUB, GOODCUB3D, on all social media platforms. Thank you very much. Have a good one.